Good morning, committee members. My name is Harjot Singh, and I'm joined by my team members Anjal, Jade, and Tej. Together, we represent the Public Services and Procurement Canada Working Group. Before we delve into our presentation, we would like to point out that we have utilized images from our Canada Bias website, including the one displayed on the screen. So without further ado, let us begin navigating the complexities of federal procurement and determine what strategies could help us move forward to take back control of federal procurement. Next slide, please. Good procurement is at the heart of good government. Federal procurement, including IT procurement, plays a crucial role in delivering essential services to taxpayers. It fosters collaboration with the private sector, ensuring the provision of goods, expertise, and services such as healthcare, transportation system, and employment assistance, and more. In the past 6 years, the Government of Canada annually purchased approximately $24 billion worth of goods and services on behalf of federal departments and agencies, making it one of the country's largest public buyer. It is worth noting that IT accounts for the largest federal procurement expenditures. However, recent years have witnessed federal procurement grabbing headlines due to controversial issues, whether it's the infamous and costly Phoenix Pay system or irregularities in the procurement process for the ArriveCan app. Mismanagement of federal procurement raises questions about the Canadian government's ability to deliver tax-funded programs and services accountably and cost-effectively. Furthermore, it undermines the feasibility of Canada's digital government agenda. Next slide, please. To be able to find a solution to a problem, the first step entails defining what the problem is. So, what exactly is the problem in this case? While we recognize that federal procurement includes a range of categories, we are focusing mainly on IT procurement. The reason behind that? Well, IT procurement entails complex requirements and a multitude of stakeholders, and usually tends to be large-scale initiatives involving significant financial investments and long development cycles. Furthermore, the frequent turnover of staff in federal IT procurement roles leads to the loss of procurement process knowledge and know-how. As a result, IT procurement is highly vulnerable to the risk of mismanagement, resulting in three main symptoms. Firstly, compromised service delivery, exemplified by the case of the Phoenix Pay system, wherein at one point more than half of the federal government employees were affected due to a broken, inefficient, and extremely costly procurement. Secondly, significant unjustified cost overruns, meaning the value of the product does not match the cost. And lastly, the public losing the trust in federal government's ability to manage procurements. Our recommended option aims to enable the government to address the three overarching symptoms by identifying the core problems within the system and facilitating progress towards resolving them. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Harjo. So as Harjo mentioned, the federal procurement system is very complex, but it can be boiled down to three overarching phases: planning, bidding, and management, each with a lot of activity within them and a lot of supporting policy and opportunity for failure. So of course, like in all sectors, there is the opportunity for ineffective communication at all stages of the procurement process. This is related to the high number of stakeholders involved, the interdisciplinary nature of the work, various channels of communication that exist, and high turnover among personnel. So at the first stage, planning and procurement, there's also the risk that the complexity of the projects is underestimated, leading to elements that are not well defined and confusion regarding what is to be produced. This confusion can be experienced by government when designing the projects and by vendors when making their bids. The disconnect during the planning phase may necessitate cost overruns or scope change later. At the bidding and contract phase, there's the potential for improper awarding of the tender. This may be due to not fully vetting tenders or having a limited number of vendors from which to choose from, possibly due to requirements that are too narrow or too onerous to attract a variety of bidders. We argue that the greatest risk of failure occurs at the contract management and closeout stage, as standardization across departments decreases and opportunities for inadequate management increase. This might include inadequate oversight or monitoring, ineffective change management leading to amendments that often increase costs and decrease scope, or legal and compliance issues that arise during the course of the project. So a large IT procurement, such as the Benefits Delivery Modernization Program, may fall into any one of these holes before it comes online in 2030. It's not only about federal spending or technology, it's about delivering essential benefits that provide a lifeline to the 16 million Canadians who rely on them. This includes old age security, GIS, CPP, and EI. The stakes are high and failure is not an option. Next slide, please. If we do not respond, things will break. We risk compromising our service delivery or getting products and services of poor value for the dollars invested. If the Benefits Delivery Modernization Program experiences the same compromised delivery as the Phoenix Pay system, it will have very dire implications for our most vulnerable Canadians. Indigenous persons, veterans, the elderly, new parents, they all might not receive the supports they need. There's also a continued risk of cost overruns, as we saw with the Arrive Can, which expanded from a budget of $80,000 to an estimated $59.5 million. This is an inefficient use of Canadian dollars, and it creates lost opportunities to fund other needed initiatives and opens us up to warranted public scrutiny. Thus, we concur with the President of the Treasury Board that a two-pronged policy package is needed to, one, review the procurement system to understand internal management problems, while also implementing some immediate changes to attain control and accountability. This policy package must be evaluated against these three criteria. Is it expected to improve service delivery by addressing accountability or enforcement mechanisms? Is it cost effective in terms of value per money spent? And does it maintain public trust by enhancing or ensuring transparency? Next slide, please. We want to stress that the federal government and PSPC recognize the problem. We understand the importance of responding, and we have made many great steps toward addressing it. These include increased stakeholder involvement in the design phase, our new suite of online procurement services known as Canada Buys, which has significantly improved transparency and communication, our Scale Up pilot program, which assists small and diverse firms in breaking into the federal procurement market, thus increasing our pool of potential vendors. Our bid challenge process also allows firms to take action on any suspected or unfair awarding of contracts. And at the contract manage phase, our new vendor performance management pilot supports the objective assessment of vendors' performance, which allows us to use their past performance to inform the awarding of future contracts. So finally, as shown in the green box at the bottom of the screen, we have a host of existing processes intended to enhance accountability throughout the entire procurement process, such as the Office of Procurement Ombud, which investigates complaints, federal whistleblower policies for any public servant who has concerns, as well as employee training and conflict of interest declarations when onboarding new employees and periodically throughout employment. Thus, we do feel that option one, our current procurement system, is strong, yet we know that instances of mismanagement do occur and believe that we can do better. So through our research, we have developed a host of policy options, which my colleague Tej will now present. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Jade. I will present option two, procurement internal examination with comprehensive enhancements, or as we call it, PEACE. This option has 5 features that could be implemented to complement the good works already occurring: a standardized pay structure, a communication strategy, internal examinations, improved record keeping, and intermediary oversight. Next slide, please. The first feature of PEACE is to standardize the pay structure used to compensate vendors. The traditional model within the technology sector has been to bill per diem rates for services. Alternate models include a fee-for-service model in which vendors are paid a pre-negotiated fee upon completion of an agreed-upon service deliverable. Shifting to service-based payments will alter the incentive structure and increase accountability with the goal of reducing cost overruns by making vendors accountable to the deliverables and pay schedules set up in the contract without compromising the value of the end product. This change will need to be communicated clearly to all stakeholders, including IT vendors who will be bidding on tenders. Next slide, please. Speaking of communication, the second feature of PEACE is a communication strategy. This should target internal personnel, external stakeholders, and the public. To regain the public's trust, the Minister of Procurement, in a joint statement with PSPC and shared services, should announce the measures being taken to tighten controls over procurement, such as the standardized pay structure we just mentioned. Internally, communications are required to help procurement specialists understand the changes. Stakeholders include the current staff as well as onboarding staff, considering the high turnover we have at PSPC and in other procurement departments. It is especially important to use communication strategy to ensure alignment from the design phase of a procurement to the very end of that contract. Next slide, please. The fourth feature of PEACE is stepping up record-keeping game. ArriveCAN has been in the news for its poor record-keeping practice. In addition, the OECD has scored Canada exactly 0 out of 9 on central reporting in its scorecard on public integrity. The Border Service and Public Health Agency have agreed with the Auditor General's recommendation to update guidance, checklists, and the compliance with documentation. However, these steps should be taken in all procurement activities, not just those of CBSA and PHAC. Next slide, please. The fifth and final feature of PEACE is intermediary oversight. The idea comes from the example of Germany, where, as you may know, PSPC has 2 of its 3 international offices. Our experience and scrutiny over ArriveCAN has made it clear that sometimes, though not always, procurement through intermediaries or headhunters can backfire. Germany works with competency centers who act as the intermediaries when required. Competency centers offer innovative solutions to government problems by providing training for the public servants, engaging with talent in private industry, and most importantly, connecting them together, which creates knowledge and technological diffusion. I will now pass it to Angel to present option 3. So next slide, please.
Thank you very much, Tage. Option 3, called CARE, is compact because it has fewer levers than option 2 and has an external review. We heard from Tage about how we can standardize the pay structure in federal procurement by switching from per diems to deliverables-based. And we heard about the communication strategy for both internal and external stakeholders. The quick implementation and low cost is an advantage of these 2 levers. Next slide, Chris. The defining feature of this option is an external review. Whether internal, option 2, or external, option 3, scope is limited to IT procurement only and beginning at the contract management phase, because this phase is the most complex, contains the greatest risk, and is the least tightly regulated. So in CARE, or option 3, the process review would be conducted externally by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, and more specifically, a special division known as the Public Sector Integrity Division. This OECD external review would have 3 objectives. First, identify all the rules of the game, so policies and procedures related to IT procurement across the federal government. Second, assess progress and impact subsequent to the Auditor General's and Procurement Ombuds recommendations. And third, score Canada against the OECD's 2015 recommendations on public procurement. The OECD should pay special attention to enforcement mechanisms built into Canada's procurement policies, including how they're triggered. Next slide, please. So, as you can see from the rubric, we recommend CARE. Recall, this is the external review by OECD and the 2 levers, pay structure and communications. See here in the columns the 3 evaluation criteria from the beginning of our presentation: quality of service delivery, cost efficiency, and maintenance of public trust. So beginning with the first row, status quo may not improve the quality of service. Consider the Benefits Delivery Modernization Program, which Jade referred to earlier, scheduled to finish in 2030. Will it work? Will veterans, Indigenous persons, and new parents get the supports they need when they need them? Some people can't afford to miss a payment, and we can't afford to have poor quality service delivery. In the next column, status quo is cost efficient, but finally, in the third column, it may not improve public trust, especially with so much ink spilled over procurement, notably ArriveCAN and Phoenix. There have been reforms promised, but more action may be needed to enhance public trust. Option 2, peace, may also not increase service quality because an internal examination may not be as rigorous as an external, and we may miss finding some efficiencies or opportunities for improvement. We're also uncertain about PEACE's cost efficiency. It is the medium cost of the three options, but how much? Well, for reference, the OAG's special reports had $1 to $2 million price tags, but those were deep dives into one specific procurement, not a review of policies and enforcement mechanisms across all IT procurements. And finally, in the third column, public trust may not be enhanced with PEACE because the internal examination may be perceived as biased, lacking transparency, or ineffective. So in the third row, CARE, which recall stands for compact and reviewed externally. We feel this sets us up for the best quality service delivery because it employs two rapid levers, changing the pay structure and that communication strategy, and a rigorous external review, complete with recommendations. Now, the OECD has the competency in this type of countrywide review demonstrated through experience. The OECD also has a suite of public integrity indicators at their disposal. Canada, as a member country, should take advantage of its OECD membership in this way. CARE has the highest cost of the three options because we assume it costs more to engage with an external firm for this type of review, although a more precise estimate could be created in future along with discussion of the specifics. And finally, CARE will enhance public trust because external reviews are perceived as transparent, unbiased, and effective. In terms of a bit of a timeline, the pay structure levers in both CARE and PEACE can be implemented immediately. Communications could extend into this fall, and we foresee the final report of either internal or external reports to be delivered in Q1 of next year, so April or June 2025. Next slide, and over to Harjot for the wrap-up.
Thank you, Angel. To conclude, the complexities of federal procurement, particularly in IT, present significant challenges that cannot be ignored. The recent instances of mismanagement highlight the urgent need for action. While we must acknowledge the steps already taken by the federal government to address these challenges, instances of mismanagement persist, suggesting that although policies aimed at preventing misconducts exist, they lack sufficient enforcement mechanisms or clarity regarding consequences for non-compliance among public servants. The scale of the problem is what necessitates the federal government to go above and beyond the status quo. Our recommended approach helps channel our efforts towards fixing the biggest leak in this giant procurement boat. By embracing this recommendation, we can align federal procurement practices with international standards and navigate the complexities of federal procurement, ensuring accountability, efficiency, and ultimately better service delivery for all Canadians. With that, we would like to thank committee members for their time, and we will now open the floor for questions.
Well, thank you very much, both to you, Harjot, and to your colleagues. Thank you very, very much for the presentation. We do have some questions, and I wonder if we might actually kind of start where you had ended, which is about the overall trade-offs, the importance of being able to pursue this as advice to decision makers. And Michelle, I know that that's an area of your interest. Please, to you.
Yeah, but I love the presentation. Very, very good. Thank you so much. What I'd like to understand a bit more is I know that you, throughout the presentation, you were really focusing on three different areas: compromised service delivery, cost overruns, diminishing public trust. So how did you determine that these were the most important areas to focus on? Were there others? I guess just shed a bit of light on kind of your issues analysis and how you determined that this was the areas that were most at risk that we needed to focus on.
Sure, I can begin answering the question. So while we acknowledge that IT is not the only sector in the government procurement that faces challenges, it does indeed carry the highest risk, as mentioned in slide 3. Another reason why we are primarily focusing on IT is due to its critical role in realizing federal government's digital government agenda. And at its core, digital government aims to modernize and adapt the way we work to make the government of Canada more responsive, efficient, and user-centric. And by leveraging modern and emerging technologies in which the private sector has expertise, the federal government aims to deliver better digital services to Canadians. So given all these objectives, it is evident that IT procurement is, well, it is high risk, but IT procurement will also continue to be a significant priority for the Canadian federal government.
And then within IT procurement, are there any other than the ones that you named areas to focus on? So there's cost overruns and others. Is there any other issues with IT procurement specifically that you thought were important, but maybe they'd be more long-term? You're not focusing on them right now. Is there anything like that you could maybe tell us about?
Sure. So yes, we did focus on these 3 main areas for now, but we do also at the same time recognize that there are more problems than just these 3 symptoms. And the whole purpose of this review is to conduct a detailed review of what exactly those problems are. So we'll have to wait until the review is done to pinpoint what exactly the problems are or what additional problems exist apart from these 3 overarching symptoms. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Philippe, I'm wondering if you've got questions.
Thank you. Sorry, I had difficulties unmuting myself. Very, very well done presentation. Very clear. Really, really appreciated the focus on service delivery. And that's the angle that I want to take. So you recognize that contracting has not been very, very successful in some instances in achieving better results for Canadians. So the approach that you are presenting right now, can you tell us a little more about how you consider that this will make sure that procurement is really a true lever in achieving those outcomes and accelerating the achievement of outcomes for Canadians? And have you considered what are the risks that the approach may cause in impeding the achievement of those outcomes?
Sure. Could we turn to slide 4, please? So I think as you acknowledged, we did plan to focus on that contract management and closeout phase. Oh, my apologies. Slide 6, please. Because it's our understanding that this is where the fewest levers have already been pulled. So as you mentioned, yes, there is concerns at that awarding of contracting phase, and we have seen, some of the current crises that we're in have been revolving around that stage. However, we have our status quo is making some progress at this phase, which is why we chose to focus to that more later phase. One of the major risks from the plan that we are suggesting would be around that changing the pay structure, so changing to the per diem rates and potentially having the risk of decreased attraction by vendors, especially within the IT world where there is, very high demand for that expertise and a lot of work opportunities. So there is the risk that they may be less incentivized to bid on government contracts. However, the government has a substantial buying power and is an attractive place to bid for and to work for. So we are anticipating that risk would not come to fruition. Also, we do intend to, although changing the pay structure, it would still be a very competitive pay structure. So just because we're moving to the fee for service doesn't mean that we're paying less necessarily. It just tightens up that hole for potential exploitation by charging the per diem rates, which is industry standards. So our fee for service rates would be determined in consultation with experts in the area and looking at what is competitive. So Yes, we've acknowledged that risk, but we do foresee ways to kind of mitigate it. And one last point too is with our scale up pilot, which we are very, very proud of. We have seen gains in attracting new businesses and more diverse businesses to that vendor pool, which then would hopefully create a wider pool from whom to choose from, who will be attracted by our changed model of payment. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think we probably got time for 2 more questions. And Ron, I might go to you first, and then to ask a question, and then I'll come to Donna to close. So Ron, please.
Thank you very much. So one of the objectives is to get some immediate improvements in the short run in terms of procurement and contracting outcomes. So in the plan you've proposed, what do you see as the biggest risks to being able to achieve some immediate gains and improvements in the short run? And what do you see as the key means of trying to manage those risks?
Thank you for the question. So the most immediate problem identified is the lack of internal communication, I would say, because we are launching something that is, in our opinion, comprehensive and cross-departmental. And therefore, as it's addressed in the presentation, it is key for every public servant within their respective department to understand what we are rolling out, to ensure compliance, to ensure that everyone's on the same page. And this has been throughout our interviews with stakeholders the most difficult part. And thank you for the hope that answers your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Donna, perhaps final question about feasibility, please.
Joel, thank you so much for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. One of the things there's many things I could talk about, but I think I'm just going to focus on the question of you because it's part of your main option care, OECD. I wondered if you could talk about the risks of giving control to an external organization. I mean, you did talk about scoring the results in relation to the OECD, which would make it public and almost give it a little bit of the shame and blame game. But would it have teeth? And what are the risks, though, of Canada giving over an external body that type of ability to assess the way we do things in Canada? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Chris, could we please go to slide 21? It should be the very last one. So thank you so much for raising the risks. I would like to temper the risks with a little bit of background to show the OECD's expertise. And so the OECD, we mentioned in our presentation, has these public integrity indicators. Absolutely, there's a risk that Canada would be shamed and blamed, to borrow your words. However, there is a bit of shaming and blaming going on already, as we see so if we look at the sphere and look at the bottom right quadrant, that the blue section is the effectiveness of internal control and risk management. So the green sort of spikes, the light green is Canada, and the dark blue is the OECD average. And the Canada is scoring low on some of the indicators. I've put them in red, any indicators that Canada is below the OECD average. So risk management framework, risk management in practice, central reporting, internal audit in practice, organizations, number of organizations covered by internal audit, and number of organizations internally audited. And at the bottom left, you can see some of the 0 out of and 1 out of the scores that Canada has been receiving. The risk, as you mentioned, of having the OECD do a deep dive into Canada to go deeper even than this is that the story will appear even worse. I would like to temper that with a hopeful prediction that the first step in improvement is acknowledging it. Let's get it in the open. Let's talk about it, and now let's take steps and be very transparent about the steps we're taking to remedy the fine.
That's really super helpful. Thank you.
Much to think about here. And thank you very much. A very, very comprehensive presentation. We appreciate the effort. And we thank you for that. I believe, Robert, we are at time. So we'll wish you the best of luck for the rest of your day, and we'll see you later.